This presentation is an overview of the Arizona Department of Education requirements for ELLs in the mainstream classroom. Be sure to watch the presentation in its entirety as it contains critical information regarding your role as the teacher. The agenda for this session addresses the first three items: required forms, ILLP planning phase, and ILLP implementation phase. Differentiation strategies and methodologies are available in a separate presentation. In order for you to better understand why we use ILLPs, here's a brief history. The Arizona ELL Task Force was given the authority to devise a plan for educating our ELLs. One method of delivery is the ILLP as follows. Schools with 20 or fewer ELLs within a 3-grade span, including kindergarten, may provide instruction through the development of individual language learner plans created for each ELL. Scheduling and time allocations in the ILLPs must meet the requirements of the scheduling and time allocations specified herein for elementary or middle and high school as appropriate for each ELL. For schools and classrooms that use ILLPs, there are 3 required forms as follows: Individual Language Learner Plan Document, or ILLP, Attachment A, or a teacher's document, student instruction per the ELP standards, and Attachment B, which is looking at the progress that the students made throughout the school year. Let's take a closer look at the ILLP document. The top of the document includes student information such as name, school, date, and district. The middle section provides the official guidance for the use of the ILLP from the Arizona Department of Education. Below this section is an area to record the most recent AZELA overall proficiency level and other AZELA scores if they are available. Page 2 of the document identifies the required instruction that students should be receiving as follows: 60 minutes each of oral English, including conversation and vocabulary, reading, writing, and grammar. Since this is an ILLP, it is understood that at the elementary level, the classroom mainstream teacher will be writing and providing the instruction of the ILLP. At the middle school and high school level, the English or language arts teacher is charged with the primary responsibility for writing and maintaining the ILLP. The required attachments are identified on page 2, as well as the required signatures. Let's take a look at what should be included in Attachment A. This document must be completed and signed by all teachers responsible for instruction. ELP standards and performance indicators must be identified for each time allocation. The goal should be achievement of performance indicators at the high intermediate proficiency level. It is recommended that each ILLP area address 4 to 5 performance indicators on an average, identified for each quarter. And the ILLP must be reviewed quarterly. This is Attachment A, which will be shared with you through Google Docs if an ELL is identified in your classroom. Any teacher that is responsible for any portion of the ELD instruction will be involved in writing the ILLP. As previously mentioned, at the elementary level, the mainstream classroom teacher is responsible for writing and facilitating the ILLP, and at the middle and high school levels, the language arts or English teacher is the responsible party. Let's look at the center section of Attachment A. Column 1, outlined in red, lists the required ILLP area, which in this example is oral English, conversation, and vocabulary. Column 2, outlined in blue, lists the required 60-minute time allocation. Column 3, outlined in green, lists the teacher's name responsible for the instruction during the 60 minutes. Column 4, outlined in orange, indicates whether the teacher is highly qualified or not. The highlighted column is where 4 to 5 performance indicators are identified using the ELP standards. And the final column, outlined in purple, is the target date for student 3 of the standards. The final 3 areas, reading, writing, and grammar, are continued on page 2 of Attachment A. Let's take a look at what should be included in Attachment B. This is where we identify any assessments that the student has been given during the quarter. This is Attachment B. On this document, you will identify any formative or summative assessments that have been accumulated over the quarter. These should be reviewed by the teacher quarterly in order to make instructional decisions moving forward. Every teacher that instructs the child should have a copy of these forms. One should also be filed in the student's cumulative folder. Attachment B also includes a column to indicate teacher recommendations for future instruction based on assessment. This is page 2 of Attachment B, used for quarters 3 and 4. Now the planning phase of the ILLP will be discussed. As mentioned earlier, the ILLP standards are used to drive instruction for ELLs and must be included in lesson plans. There are 3 domains and 1 strand in the ILLP standards as follows. 1. Listening and speaking domain. 2. Reading domain. 3. Writing domain. And finally, the language strand, which contains standard English conventions or grammar skills and vocabulary. Time allocations dictate that there are 60 minutes of oral English, including conversation and vocabulary, grammar, writing, and reading. There are ELP standards that are correlated with time allocations as indicated below each domain or strand that teachers should be using within that time allocation. This is an example of the format of the standards. At the very top of each page, the stage will be identified according to the student's grade level. Next row is the domain or strand. Below the domain or strand is the standard. Then you can see we have proficiency levels broken down to match the Azella test. On the far left, you will find a concept correlated with the standard. There are also sub-concepts in the language strand. Underneath each proficiency level, you will see a code that can be used for lesson planning purposes. It is recommended that teachers teach to the intermediate level and scaffold back depending on the student's identified proficiency level. The English language proficiency standards provide a logical and linear ordering of concepts, standards, and performance indicators to assist teachers in the design, development, and implementation of English language development instruction for English language learners. In order to choose which ELP standard and performance indicators to use, a teacher should take the following into consideration. Identify which ELP domain, language strand, based on the time allocation. Identify ELL's subtest proficiency level. Identify ELL's need based on additional data available for each student. Review ELP performance indicators that contribute to content standards to target specific matches. Determine which level of performance indicators should be placed on Attachment A. Again, the goal is to have ELLs attain skills at the high intermediate level. Look at what you are going to be teaching all students so that you can look for the performance indicators that contribute to that. Then determine which level performance indicator you would report on Attachment A. Choose goals based on students' level. Goals should change over the year. Here is an example of a standard at Stage 3, appropriate for grades 3 through 5 in the domain of reading. Remember, the goal is to move students from their identified proficiency level through higher intermediate. It's recommended that teachers teach to the high intermediate level and scaffold back depending on the student's identified proficiency level. Now we'll move to talking about how to implement the ILLP in the classroom. The ILLP documents are the plan that outlines the instruction for the student. The teacher utilizing the ILLP for English language learners will continue to identify strategically specific ELP standards and performance indicators. These should be based on the time allocation assigned and on the appropriate use of these in the content instruction. Keep in mind that if a teacher is responsible for more than one time allocation, the lesson plans document the performance indicator for each area of differentiated instruction. If more than one teacher is responsible for the instruction for a specific student, collaboration should be ongoing to ensure that coordination of instruction is reinforced. Regarding lesson plans, the teacher's lesson plan will contain which performance indicator from Attachment A will be used to differentiate the instruction for the student. Classroom instruction should match ILLP Attachment A and the lesson plan. Now we will look at how to record a student's progress after a quarter of instruction. Remember, Attachment B is used to identify the assessments being used to inform instruction. Some examples are DIBELS, unit tests, benchmark data, writing samples, observation checklists, or lab write-ups. This is an example of Attachment B with Quarter 1 data completed. There are 5 columns that will need to be filled in for each assessment used. On the far left, outlined in red, the assessments are numbered. To the right, outlined in blue, is the name of the assessments used. Next, outlined in green, is the date assessment was given. The final outlined section indicates the results. Look now at the highlighted section. This is for recommendations. This is where the teacher will enter instructional changes based on the assessment results. This concludes the overview of the ILLP process. After viewing this presentation, you should be prepared to initiate the process for your student. To assist you through this, you will be contacted by a district ILLP specialist who will send you the necessary documents. ILLPs must be written in a timely manner. The timeline per the Arizona Department of Education for writing the ILLP, notifying parents, obtaining the required signatures, and implementing the plan is 30 days if the student enrolls within the first 2 weeks of school, and 10 days if the student enters after the first 2 weeks. Thank you.